Hello, friends. Welcome back to the While We're Waiting Hope After Child Loss podcast. I'm Jill Sullivan, your host and one of the co founders of the While We're Waiting ministry. This is a podcast of stories of devastating loss and grief and heartbreak and struggle, and stories of hope and healing and faith and, yes, even joy. Underlying every conversation is the hope we have in Jesus Christ, which makes it possible to not just survive the loss of a child, but to live well while we're waiting to see them again in heaven one day. You can learn more about our ministry and the free bereaved parent retreats we host by visiting our website at www.whilewe'rewaiting.org. Welcome to episode number 263. In today's episode, I'm honored to introduce you to Katy Bone, a mom whose story is marked by both deep sorrow and strong faith. In this first part of our conversation, Katy shares the story of her first experience with loss, a miscarriage she and her husband endured in 2016, and the anxiety and heartache that followed in her next pregnancy. She then shares the sacred and heartbreaking journey of Barrett's life, from a complicated pregnancy to a devastating diagnosis and 28 precious days in the NICU. She speaks with honesty about the emotional whiplash of hope and heartbreak and the ways God's presence sustained her through every moment. This episode is a welcome reminder of how faith can carry us through even the most unimaginable circumstances. Hi, Katy. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I have been looking forward to our chat because most of my guests I've had the opportunity to meet through a retreat or a support group meeting or something like that, but you and I have never had a chance to meet. So I'm going to be learning about you along with our audience today. So tell us where you're from and what life is like for you there.
Yeah, I am from St. Louis, Missouri, so live in the Midwest. I think we're known for our arch, not
That's
not
right.
much
I've been
else.
there.
Yeah, oh, happy nice.
Oh, sure.
Um, yeah, I mean we have all four seasons, and I like it. It's really hot in the summer and really cold in the winter, so it's a nice place to live, and that's about it for Missouri.
What is it that you do there?
Yeah, so I would say for what we do here is there's a lot of like farmers markets. That's what we like to do is farmers markets. A lot of like hiking, a lot of nature. At our house in the summer, we like to like plant. We have a little garden, so we do that, plant tomatoes and cucumbers and different herbs. And I feel like we also do got on the sourdough kick, and I feel like that. I don't know if I could be wrong here, but I feel like it works well in Missouri with our humidity. I feel like it helps my bread rise faster. Yeah, and then work is getting to that probably later on as well, but work has changed for me. And my master's in counseling is my like what I went to school for, but through my grief and everything else, my career has changed drastically just in the last few months, actually, which is
Yeah.
crazy to me.
Yeah. And we will be talking about that later. So look forward to hearing
Yeah.
about that.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
we are going to be talking a lot about your son, Barrett, today. But Barrett
Yes.
wasn't your first experience with loss. Talk about that.
Yeah, so when my husband and I got married, we, always talked about kids and didn't really necessarily have a timeline. I think that I wasn't necessarily naive to the topic of loss. So my mom, she had four miscarriages before my oldest brother that's living was born. And so she was always very open about that and talking to us about it. And I'm actually very thankful for that. My mom is from a generation that you don't really talk about much, and you definitely don't talk about loss. And from her kind of some of her religious background, you just didn't talk about it. So we found out we were pregnant in 2016. We were so excited. We were really wanting to expand our family. So we went to ultrasound, saw his heartbeat, and just started making plans. We told my mom about him, and it was just a beautiful, beautiful way that we told her we were in a clothing store and the lady handed us a fake coupon. My mom opened it and there was an ultrasound in it. I forgot. I got her to go to a baby clothing store. I said we were going to shop for my nephew. And so she was jumping up and down and just so excited. And we went to the next ultrasound at about 10 weeks, and the doctor or the ultrasound tech couldn't find his heartbeat. And she was devastated. The look on her face was just, devastated. We were, because we had, always heard if you see the heartbeat, your chance of miscarriage at that point is, I mean, it was like 5% or something. And I think those statistics really should be updated. I think that's because people don't go as late anymore. A lot of people are getting their ultrasounds much earlier. And I mean, my first ultrasound was probably like 6 weeks. So we found out that it was a missed miscarriage. I had no symptoms, nothing. I had never heard of that term. I just, again, just didn't know what you don't know. So I called my mom. Well, actually, let me backtrack. My doctor, Dr. McDonald, she's phenomenal. She's also a Christian. She was just very nurturing. I don't think everyone gets that experience. And she said, someday when you get to heaven, you'll get to ask God why. And she said, but it won't matter because you'll be with him. And I was like, that stuck with me because you just ask God why with a lot of things. And there's just not a reason. And things happen. And so that has always stuck with us. And so she was just beautiful through the whole experience. I had to have a DNC because he stayed in there, but they're able to do some testing afterwards, and we found out it was a boy. And we called him a little bit from the beginning. My mom has always taught me to nickname your babies. Not to like anticipate loss, but just I don't know, have fun. Nicknaming them early on. So we did that, and we liked that. So yeah, so we found out he had triploidy. So essentially, like triple the amount or double the amount of one set of chromosomes. But yeah, he had triploidy and they found out it was a boy. So that was our very first experience with loss.
Yeah. And then what was pregnancy after loss like?
Yeah, so I would say much different with Poppy. Poppy was born and still living, and much different with her than our sons after Barrett. But we kind of were very, scared in those early times, especially because it was a miscarriage. I had that naive taken away from me that like you're supposed to, cramp or you have symptoms. Like I realized like there really isn't a norm. And that is kind of carried on throughout my life in a lot of ways, that there's not what you think is going to happen isn't necessarily that. So the whole time I always wondered, like, is Poppy going to make it? Now, I will say when I got a little bit further along, again, I'm not naive, I did feel better about that, but it was still scary, but at
Sure.
that point I had had that experience. So I was further along and I didn't have any other traumatic story in addition. So I just kind of based it off of a little bit, and it was different. And so we did her gender reveal, and it was definitely beautiful, and I was able to kind of calm down, but it was always in the back of my mind. Thereafter, it's kind of stripped away from you that like fun, magical moment that you're, kind of taught when you grow up.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I can imagine that. So, before we get into Barrett's story, I would love to know how you chose his name. All of your kids have kind of unique names, but I'd like to hear about Barrett's name story.
Yeah, there's not much with his. It's funny, like Poppy is actually Penelope, but with Barrett, when my husband and I were dating, we heard the name and we just always loved the name Barrett. We always loved like Baby Bear. And I mean, we're talking like early on in our dating, we talked about that name, and it was always that was going to be the name that we named our son. It was going to be Barrett. And it stuck, and I don't think did I actually, yeah, we told people earlier on that would be his name when we found out that he was a boy.
Yeah. So he was named before you even saw him, huh?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. So you went in for your 20-week anatomy scan. And what happened there?
Yeah, so they go through everything. Again, you just with Poppy, it was everything was okay. And they said he has a two-vessel cord. And at the time, my husband's one of his childhood friends, their kid was due like the exact same time, and he was also told that. And if you do research, you can, I mean, look up so many different things, the two vessel cord, but the most common, but we also found out I'm like the anomaly of everything. Like it's awful. But usually it just means your child is a smaller baby. They might have to induce early because they're likely to grow better on the outside, but ironically, my body is what kept Barrett the safest. So yeah, it usually just means a smaller baby. They're like, we're going to keep checking growth. Poppy was a smaller baby. That's likely there was nothing else wrong. So like everything else checked off fine. So you would never associate a two vessel cord with the condition he had, even though the condition he had, most babies only had a two vessel cord if that so but one wouldn't lead you to the other, so it's yeah, so definitely we were scared. We were watching his weight at every appointment to make sure that that was on track, but it was definitely scary, and I would definitely advise people to not Google when you find out things
Mm,
like
yeah,
I did.
Googling is never good when you
No,
get something like that. Yeah. Yeah, I
no.
know what you mean. So talk about the day that Barrett was born and then the weeks that followed.
Yeah, so the day he was born, we ended up, because of the two vessel cord thing, they were always doing some extra tests. And at 37 weeks, my doctor's like, he's not responding the way we would like on this certain stress test thing. So we're like, okay, so we'll induce you. Like, okay, so 37 weeks, technically full term, just early full term.
Sure.
So I went in and it was kind of nice. I had never been induced before. Poppy's was like literally out of a movie. My water didn't break, but I went it like contractions, went in and she was born. It was perfect. Weird for a first birth, but so Barrett go in. I needed to get induced. Pretty uneventful. Overall, we just needed to get him out. So started that process. Everything was fine. Pretty slow. That's just how my pregnancy towards the end. It's like slow until bam, they come out. So it was great. It was relaxing, to be completely honest. Just there with my family. Poppy came up to visit. She was there most of the time, and I felt like a rush. Like I was like, oh, he's low, because they had kept checking me, nothing crazy, until I like felt like, okay, I'm pretty sure he's getting ready to come out. And we had Poppy's birth photographed. We were like, we're gonna have this photographed too. So our friend Alex Mooney with Alexandria Birth Stories by Alexandria Mooney. She's phenomenal. She's a lost mom herself. And so I texted her and I was like, okay, well, backtrack an hour before that. I was like, oh, it's going to be a little while. I'm only a five, whatever. I think it was like 5 centimeters. It'll be a while. Well, now we know I go from five to complete within an hour. And so she was like, okay, I'll do whatever. I'm pretty sure she was my timeline after Barrett. My memory's not as good, but I think she was actually pregnant with her rainbow baby. So she was actually, I feel like, pretty pregnant. So I told her, I was like, it'll be a while. Well, then I could tell, like, Tyler, it's my husband, he's gonna come out. So they called Alex and are like, okay, now's the time. Sorry. So they come in, they're like, oh, you're complete. You need to start pushing now. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Alex isn't here. These pictures are everything. Obviously, I didn't know what I didn't know was getting ready to happen. So they get everything ready, put me in the stirrups, all the things, and they want me to start pushing. I didn't know I had a bit of an actress in me. So I fake pushed for not too long, but long enough. And I did the grunting noises, everything, because I was like, he's not coming out. Like, I'm getting these pictures. And for the grace of God, I'm thrilled that I did that. So then Alex shows up, huffing and puffing. And I said, now I can start pushing. And so they all just erupted in laughter, and it was hilarious. And so then I pushed him. I was very fast after that. And it was beautiful. I definitely noticed that his cry was weaker, but you're so caught up in the moment that you don't think like he's sick, nothing else checked out, like what, what would be wrong. So they put him on my chest and I'm holding him. And then they like took him kind of fast and we're doing some tests, but they were definitely not. This hospital, like they're just very, they don't have like a big NICU and all of these things. So I think they're just a lot more like somber and quiet. And I love that hospital so much. So I then said, "Oh, can I nurse him?" Again, naive me, not realizing what is even going on. And that's outside of character for me. I'm pretty like investigative, like otherwise, like I'm pretty hyper aware of things. And they're like, "No." And I'm like, "That's really weird. Like, who tells the mom like they can't nurse their baby? That's weird." And then they were just saying things like, he's sick. I don't even remember exactly, but just like some kind of like basic talk, like we're gonna need to probably, take him. And they probably told me why, but again, like a lot of this is like blocked out. And so I was doing skin to skin. I have beautiful pictures of this, no tubes, no wires. The only
Mm.
time I don't have that. And I told my husband, I really think you need to hold him. And so my husband took his shirt off and did skin to skin. And again, those are the only pictures my husband has like that without tubes and wires. And that was kind of the start of realizing like he's sick. But again, we had no idea what we were in for thereafter. Oh, and Poppy, I think she met him there, but she was kind of up there during it too. So,
Mm. Yeah. So they took him from you at that point,
yeah.
and what happened from there?
Yeah. So from there, that hospital has like a specialty care nursery, they call it. So it's not a NICU. I had Poppy there, great experience. They took him there just to put him on some like oxygen. I'm sure much more than that. Again, I forget exactly what they did there, but they were doing definitely a lot, like continuously working on him. But again, we just thought he was just kind of they actually call it wimpy white boy syndrome when boys don't transition well. If you've ever heard, it's like legitimately what doctors call it. It sounds awful, but it's a true thing. That white males don't transition well, or many of them don't. So that's kind of what were thinking was going on. He just needed a little bit of help. Like his APGAR scoring and all of that wasn't well. So they were helping him breathe there. And then they actually work with a neonatologist. No, what do they call it? Is that right? Is that the right?
That
I'm like,
sounds right. Yeah. Neonatologist.
yeah, I think that's right. So a doctor from a different hospital, Mercy, we were at St. Luke's Mercy, they brought her in. So she essentially comes in because she works with like the specialty care nursery as a professional who knows more of like the NICU side. So she came in and talked with us and she said, he's not, breathing well. There's probably some fluid in his lungs. I probably saying some of this wrong. These moments are very, very blurry to me. So we're gonna transfer him because he's just not, doing that well there. So I finally, once my kind of epidural wore off, I was able to like go into the specialty care nursery and put my hand on him, but I couldn't really like hold him or because they had all the wires kind of monitoring him. And they're like, okay, you have two options for hospitals. So thankfully, St. Louis has fantastic hospitals. You can go to Mercy or you can go to St. Louis Children's Hospital. The St. Louis Blues parade was that day. So we chose Mercy because there was a downtown parade. It would have been a little bit more difficult to get to Children's. So she said the biggest difference is ECMO. Mercy doesn't have ECMO, but he won't need ECMO. Well, silly us. So we transferred him. They brought in a whole transport team, transferred him to Mercy Hospital. And then from Mercy Hospital, it's like everything went downhill. Like we were told, like, oh, this was on I believe Friday. I remember one of the staff not like giving us definites. I knew like if you gave me a timeline, I get it can be different. I'm not, it's fine. And I said, like, when do you think he would probably go home? They're like, oh, I would think like Monday or Tuesday. Okay, cool. And so when he was at Mercy, it just things like wouldn't stop. Like they put different IV lines in, they were doing just different medical procedures. And then that's when it got like very serious, when we would find out just more things like he's not responding at all. He's not doing well. It was like around the clock, respiratory therapists there, nurses, doctors, just everyone there trying to figure out like what is going on. So then they call children's transport team, and they're a crew of paramedics, nurses, doctors, and so they bring them in. So then they have to put Barrett on their transport machines, like their transport ventilator, their transport, just all of their things. And these people are, I mean, the best of the best. And they came to us and said he's not responding to our transfer ventilator. And we're like, okay, like, what do we do? And mind you, I'm only 12 hours, yeah, like 12 hours postpartum. Like, I had just had a baby. And I left the hospital sooner than I probably should have left. I was so swollen because I mean, obviously stress. I had just had a baby. I was on my feet too much. Everyone kept telling me to sit down. Obviously, I'm bleeding, not taking care of myself because I don't care about myself at that point.
Right. Sure.
And the doctor came to my husband and said, I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place. Your son's not responding to the ventilator, so he can stay here. You guys can hold him, but he'll die. Or we can essentially bag him the entire way to the hospital. And it's kind of up to you. My husband is a paramedic, thankfully, so he kind of he understands like he understands all the medical things, which is nice, but it's his child. And he said, if this was your child, what would you do? Because in the back of his mind, he's thinking like, let's do the transfer. And that's essentially what the doctor was, saying. And because he can't tell us what to do in that situation, but we want guidance. Like not even 30 years old. I think we're like 20, 27, 20. I don't know. I'm like, I just feel like I'm too young to be making these decisions about my own
Sure.
child.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
so we decided to take that transfer, and it was awful. I remember I broke down. I was like on the ground just sobbing. I couldn't, they say it's like the biggest hormonal shift anyone can have is after childbirth. And I'm being told like, okay, we're going to bag your son the entire way with like literally just, giving him air that way. And my husband told me, he's like, you have to basically like put me in check, which was good because he was like, he's very compassionate, but he knew I wanted to be in that ambulance. So he had to think like, how can I get her on the ambulance? It's for her to calm down. So on the entire way to the hospital, not that far of a drive, but it felt like eternity. We just sat there and held hands and prayed, and just we would look back and you could just see them, I mean, working to keep him alive that entire car ride, our ambulance ride. And they got him there. His heart rate was so low. But he did survive that transfer. And that's the hardest car ride of my life for sure.
Yeah. What a harrowing experience that
Yeah,
had to
it was
be.
awful. Yeah, it
Yeah.
was awful.
Mm. But he made it there and they continued to work on him. And after about 3 weeks, I believe you got a diagnosis. And what
Yes.
was that diagnosis and what did it mean for Barrett?
Yeah, it was awful. They kept going through the list of things that it could be, and it sounds terrible that some of the items on the list is what I wished for, and it still would have been a really difficult life for him, but he would be here. So they kept going through all of the list. Did he aspirate meconium? Did he not have did he have lack of surfactant in his lungs? All of these lists. And I remember one time they said, we're going down the list. We have our things we're checking for based on how he's presenting. And this is a very good hospital. They do many transplants. He was in one of the best places he could be, thankfully. And they said, one thing is alveolar capillary dysplasia. Hopefully it's not that. That's, the end of the list. And so, of course, I looked it up and I told my husband, I was like, it's fatal. And I was like, of all the things, he so far has checked off all those other things, and it's not that. And then I remember when the doctor, she walked in, and I felt bad for her because she always was the one to deliver bad news. It was that just when it was her shift, poor thing. She walked in, and I knew right then that was that was what it was. And I already had looked it up. And I'm kind of glad I had already had looked it up. They were always very straightforward, but they're still a hospital of, they're very hopeful of things, not unrealistic though. They still will tell you kind of the chance, of things. But yeah, the way she looked at me, I knew. And she's like, "Is there anything I can do for you?" And I said, "Please let me hold him," because he was on ECMO. And so he had the tubes in his neck, and it was very dangerous for us to hold him. And so they're like, "Yes, you can." So it took a lot of effort, and it kind of sucked. Not sucked that I had to hold my son, but it was not like how you would hold a baby because you had to be so careful because of all the tubes. So I remember that day just like having so much hope the day he was born, even knowing he was sick, to that hope just like dwindling and dwindling and dwindling, realize like he's not going to make it. And then having to make sure the world knew that because so many people just kept saying like he'll pull through, he'll pull through. And it's like I get that, but it also like there's stats on this that there's like two survivors. So of course we hoped he would be one of them. But
Right, of course. You were very intentional about trying to make some memories with Barrett. Talk about that.
from the start, I'm big on pictures, and I think it's almost like a trauma response now because I take so many pictures. And it's like you want to be present, but what if someone else in your life dies? So I was always big on pictures anyways, but yeah, the nurses helped with that. So we take tons of pictures. We took like videos of us reading to him. We would do baths. So I'm like, I don't get to take him home and, give him a bath. We'll give him a bath there. To bath, we got to change his diaper. And those are memories that will be forever. My mom crocheted him things to wear, and we kind of laughed at him because some of them looked ridiculous, but they were cute. But sometimes she'd made this red, white, and blue tie, and my dad was laughing at him about it. But yeah, we just did everything we could to make the time that we had. I don't even know. I don't even have words for it, but just make
Yeah.
the most of
Well,
the time.
you made that time memorable, it sounds
Yeah,
like.
absolutely.
Yeah. I love that your mom did that. That's really fun.
Yeah. Yeah. She still makes most beautiful things.
Yeah, that's special. You talk about how you had a lot of emotional whiplash during Barrett's short life. What was that like and what sustained you through that?
Yeah, I think it's actually a great question because it's something that we don't talk about a lot because it's hard to articulate. And I think a lot of people think like my son was born, he was sick, and he died. I don't think they understand that we didn't even have a diagnosis for 3 weeks. It was awful. Like he was born, we thought, okay, he's sick. That's, fine. He'll get some oxygen, be on his way. And then he goes to one hospital, and then we're told he's going to probably die here unless he can make the transfer. So it's like whiplash again. It's just so much up and down, up and down. There were times that they had to make sure that everything else for him was healthy in order for him to get a lung transplant. They had him hooked up to an EEG, so it's checking brain activity for seizures, all the things because he was sedated a lot of the time so that he was comfortable. And there was one time they thought they saw something, so then that would disqualify him for a lung transplant. Because the whole time, even when we had a diagnosis, well, not the whole time, when we had a diagnosis, we knew the only treatment was a lung transplant. So that's also where a lot of the ups and downs came from because if you didn't check all the boxes, you're not even eligible for lungs. And so they would call us into this conference room like, "Well, you have to talk." And so basically he's ineligible. Oh, actually, his brain activity is fine. And it was. So it was so much back and forth. I remember they came to us and talked to us about the lung transplant, like, okay, we're gonna do this. Okay. And then in order to be on the list, you had to get a different type of ECMO. So they changed it from, it gets VA ECMO to VV. All it means to people is that the ECMO tubing goes from their neck into their chest. And so that's essentially another way to prove that his heart is healthy. Because again, every other organ has to be healthy for you to get the lungs. Okay. But after he got that surgery, it was like downhill from there. He just didn't do well with his lungs not working properly it put so much pressure on his heart that that's actually why he died, was from heart failure, but it all was in result from his lungs. So it was just one thing after the next. You would overcome one hurdle and then you'd be still 10 steps back, and you just kept fighting, you kept researching, you kept doing everything because while these doctors are experts, we're still our kids' best advocate. And so I'll always be thankful for my husband for always looking up all the medical things. I would help, but of course I don't understand it like he does. He would ask about every medication Barrett was on. He would ask every single number. And I think that he takes a lot of pride in that. And I hope he always does because he did such a good job fighting for him that there's no guilt in that. I think we advocated the best we could, but those ups and downs were awful, awful, awful,
Yeah.
awful.
I could see where his medical knowledge would be both a blessing and a curse at the same time.
100%. Because I didn't even know what
Yeah,
ECMO was. And so when he
right,
heard the word ECMO, he was like, oh no. So, and here I am like, what's that?
right, right. Would you mind sharing a little bit about your final moments with Barrett?
Yeah. Also one we don't talk about too much. So when he had to get transferred to the cardiac floor, so the CICU, and that were warned that that floor was intense, and it was. They did not, we were there for like a full, I don't even know, was it probably over 24 hours, but not too long. I'm probably off on that time frame. But anyways, um, they didn't stop the entire time working on him, the entire time. So he went into surgery late because a little girl was actually getting a lung transplant. And I remember being so happy for her, but so like jealous, this little girl. And I still see updates of her, and I'm obviously so happy for her. It's like I had hoped that Barrett had the same thing she had because she's alive. And I remember his surgery got pushed back because she was getting her lungs. It was going to be the same doctor, which is wild to me that he could do those back to back. So he did those. He slept for a little bit, and then he did Barrett's surgery. And it just didn't it worked, but he just wasn't that stable. So they told us we have one more option, and they kind of went over those, and it was a scary option, but again, it was the last option. So we went in for that surgery like a day later, roughly. And that doctor is a Christian, and he actually pulled us in the conference room, and we all prayed together, and this ended up being his anniversary as well. Poor guy. Um, and so we did that surgery, and I know they had to do CPR during the surgery. He just didn't respond to it. And the nurse practitioner grabbed us to take us back to see him after they brought him in the room. And he just looked very sick, like sicker. The whole time he looked sick, but he looked really sick. And then the doctor had to start doing compressions in front of us. And seeing a baby that little getting compressions is awful. So at that, I just said stop, and they knew, I'm sure. I've never asked, but I'm sure they knew in their mind like he's gonna die. They're doing that for us, let's work, let's work him. And I respect that. And so I said, please stop, let me hold him. And so I held him, and they stopped the compressions, and then he died in my arms. But I do think it's beautiful that the same arms that welcomed him in the world were the same arms that held him as he died. And they pronounced him dead while I was holding him. And my husband was right there. And then shortly after, all the grandparents came in too, and Poppy got to see him and be with him, and we got to hold him and put a cute he had a cute little outfit on that another mom gave us. And then we have these favorite beanies that all of our boys have worn, and we put one on him. And I remember the thought of seeing my kid in a body bag like horrified me. And I remember we wanted our last moments to be with him with a beautiful blanket, which he was, and we sang to him. And then we also said the Lord's blessing over him as well. And those are some of the moments we had. And I try not to have like regrets with like, I wish I was with him more. And there's so many things that go through my mind, but I've come to kind of understanding I did the best I could with the knowledge that I had in that moment and with like what was good for me in that moment. And so it was beautiful. We got to hold him and rock him, and then the staff, one lady, she or one nurse, she had just gotten back from a knee replacement surgery. I think it was her first day back, and she was one of the nurses on her feet that, I mean, her entire shift. And I'm like, she had to have been so sore. She has since, I'm almost positive, retired. I'm like, it probably put her in retirement. And you could just see the horror on their faces, which it was almost a good feeling that they're not jaded. You know what I mean? It's in that the cardiac Florida Children's Hospital, they see death, I'm pretty sure, decently often. And just the way that they handled everything, and they got those wires and everything off of him so fast so that we had like full reign of him. And it was beautiful how they were just so nice. They helped brought in the chaplain to do like his hand, foot, and footprints for us, and it was just really sweet how they unfortunately knew how to handle loss.
Yeah. Yeah. Sounded like they had a good plan in place for that,
Yeah, they
to
did.
give you as much time with him as you could. And yeah, I'm glad you were able to take advantage of that. Thank you for joining us for this first part of Katy Bone's powerful story. As we've heard, Barrett's life was brief but meaningful, and the journey Katy and her family walked during those 28 days was both heartbreaking and sacred. In the next episode, we'll continue our conversation as Katy reflects on how grief has shaped her over the past 6 years, how it's changed her identity, her faith, and even her career path. She also shares how Barrett's legacy lives on through their nonprofit ministry, Blessings for Barrett, which brings hope and comfort to grieving siblings across the country. You won't want to miss the second half of our conversation, so be sure to subscribe and follow, and I look forward to sharing it with you next Wednesday.